Hello and welcome to this penultimate panel here at Watches and Wonders. We are streaming live from Geneva, from the Salon. Today we're talking about blockchain. There's been a lot of buzz in the industry about this idea of blockchain, but so far very few concrete applications. Well, we are going to try and lift the lid on this complex subject with a fantastic team of industry specialists. Let's go and meet them. Well, as I said, we've got a fantastic team of panellists. We're going to start with those who are joining us from around the world. We've got Angela Au-Yeung, who's Chief Digital Officer at Vacheron Constantin. Then we have Pierre-Nicolas Hurstel from Arianee. He's the CEO of Arianee. That's a platform that creates digital passports for luxury goods, including watches, of course. Finally, we've got from abroad, we've got Serge Maillard. He's the publisher at Europa. That's, of course, the well-known publication focusing on watches. He's written extensively about watches and also about blockchain. And then here in the studio, in real life, wonderfully for me, I have Vincent Perriard, who is the founding partner of Origyn, which is a not-for-profit organization that's using blockchain. It's using artificial intelligence and machine learning to eliminate counterfeiting in the luxury goods market. So, of course, that includes watchmaking. And then we have Alexandre Wehrlin, Managing Director at the European Business School in Geneva and a luxury digital consultant. Also joining us in the studio today, a very packed studio, we have from the Fondation, Pascal Ravessou and Benjamin Tesser. Morning to you both.
Hello. Good morning, Belle.
They're going to be here with us and they're going to be taking your questions. Do not forget, during the course of this discussion, to put your questions into the chat so that we can make sure that we have time to answer all of your questions at the end of our discussion. I'm going to launch, first of all, with something. Let's try and start with the basic. It is a very complex subject. So, Alexandre Wehrlin, I'd love for you, I'm sorry the task has fallen to you right at the beginning, to just try and explain to us simply what blockchain means.
Why choosing me to try to explain? But I will try. Over the last days here at Watches and Wonders, we heard a lot about the importance of consumer experience, consumer information, younger clientele, and the growing importance of sustainability, counterfeiting, or direct-to-consumer. Blockchain can help on this. So everybody agrees, but how? Blockchain is one technology that agrees. First of all, blockchain, it's transparent for the end user. You don't see a blockchain like a web, for instance, okay? Then the concept is a storage of information that are by blocks and linked in chain with an algorithm. So basically, you cannot infringe that information because all the blocks are linked and need to receive the same code to activate and edit.
So once a block is complete, is full, as it were, you move on to the next block and that previous block cannot be changed.
Exactly.
Right.
It's all linked into a chain of information.
Okay.
So that's the logic. Now, what's interesting is the concept and how it can help in terms of marketing and businesses. So to explain that, of course, there's different application. Property transfer, we have seen this. I think Vacheron has worked, hello Angela, I think on this. Wehrlin as well, I think Arianee, you worked also on this. So there are some progress indeed in the watchmaking industry. But there are many applications on financial, for example. Of course, Bitcoin is very famous. So that's one property transfer, that you can record the property and you cannot erase or modify it afterwards. Mm-hmm. Okay, that's the first property transfer. The second is as a registry, like you can imagine intellectual property or track and trace in the supply chain. And the third is smart contract. I won't enter this too much, but basically you can automatize a contract terms. So I bought 2 bottles for you, not to drink. Thank you, not for you to drink here.
We did wonder. No. We were hoping.
So anyway, I moved a lot with these bottles, so I don't think we can really actually drink them. But you see 2 examples. That's a very nice bottle from Australia. You see a QR code. Basically, you download an application. However, it's not linked to that bottle. Okay, you download an application. You need to search for it. Contrary to this one is a prototype we did with Wecan. When you scan that QR code, you go directly to the information of that specific bottle. So basically, you know at which day the grape was collected, by whom, who is the winemaker, if there's any analysis, like any pesticides or any fungicide that is in the bottle or not. And then you have the track and trace until the table of the customer. So basically, finally, the winemaker, and we can make a parallel with the watchmaker, you know who is your end consumer. Before, for many of these guys, they will sell to a wholesaler and then it's gone. You don't know what's going on. If you remember Nike Plus, they really changed the marketing by tracking their pair of shoes.
Yeah.
It's a bit the same system. And there's, in this bottle, in this prototype, you have registry, property transfer, and a lot of information.
And I know that before, we were mentioning this before we went live, and I know that Vincent Perriard had already found a possible problem with this. Just talk us through that, because this is what you do.
No, the question was, what makes you sure that the content of the bottle is authentic? And that's always been, for me, the big question mark. It's the same for the watch industry or for the leather goods industry. So what makes you sure that the information that you're putting on the blockchain is authentic? Because you could put, you know, that's a challenge.
This we cannot guarantee. However, the fact that it's transparent and then you have an ownership of each data, of each steps, reduce a lot counterfeiting, reduce a lot misinformation, because you have a track and trace of information at each step of this bottle. And again, you can make a parallel with our watch.
I'm going to come on to what Vincent Perriard is doing in order to try and combat this in a second. But first, I know that, Alexandre Wehrlin, you mentioned their Vacheron, Constantin, and the work that they're already doing in this field. Let's go to Angela Au-Yeung, Chief Digital Officer at Vacheron, Constantin. I'd love to hear, because you're using blockchain already at the brand. You're one of the first to embrace the technology within the watch industry. Can you explain to us just what you're doing, how you're using it, what customers get from this?
Sure. Well, first of all, very happy to be here today to be exchanging with our colleagues and definitely focusing on such innovative and it's going to be a very important technology dynamics brought about by the blockchain. At Vacheron Constantin, we started a pilot almost 2 years ago already to really use the blockchain technology and its very unique characteristics, like Alex was explaining, to help the customers understand that this watch is authentic. So what we did was basically to focus or pilot on our Le Collectionneur pieces, which are vintage pieces that we collected back to the manufacturer, to our maison, where we will go through a process of refurbishments, authentication, and after the process, as an authority to prove the authenticity of the pieces, we basically put the digital certificate onto the blockchain to show the customers that this is an authentic watch as proven by Vacheron Constantin. And what comes with it is the more interesting part of the storytelling of the watch. We have an amazing archive of many stories for these vintage pieces. We go back to our archive to dig out all the relevant stories about the piece, and then we also put that onto the chain so that the customers, with just a few clicks on the mobile phone, they can also read about all the interesting, relevant information about the watch. And that was just the first step. And for us, that's going to evolve into rolling out the same digital certification on all our new pieces. That's going to start later in this year. And then also, we've been working on different use cases along the client journey. So just to wrap it up as well, to answer your question, what are the benefits to the clients? I think there is a very innovative way to access information. They manage to protect their privacy if they prefer to, and then they can really access this information and the history or the story of the watch that's going to happen down the years. It's also going to be put on the chain. So that's a lot of benefits that comes with it.
Definitely. I wonder whether Pierre-Nicolas Hurstel from Arianee, you are working with several brands in this field. Are there other ways? We've heard from Vacheron, Constantin, what they're doing within this field. Are there other ways that you're already identifying of how you can use blockchain in watchmaking, not only, of course, for the customer, but also for the brand?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me. I'm delighted to be with you today. So we are alongside the Vacheron Constantin since day one on this project. We developed a digital passport technology based on blockchain to help brands transform the relationship they have with their owners and with their clients, with all the benefits that are brought by the blockchain. So today we work with Vacheron, we work with Breitling. I think we are the most widely deployed technology on this field, with hundreds of thousands of watches and products that are already equipped with a digital passport. And we really see these new elements in the relationship as a game changer on a couple different angles. First of all, the transparency. We focus on transparency after manufacturing. The example of the bottle of wine is really interesting, but for us, it's really hard to guarantee what happens before the manufacturing. Who inputs information? Obviously, it's possible for the brand to give this information to the client in a declarative way, but we don't focus on applying the blockchain to, guarantee what happened before the production. We really focus on applying it after the product is manufactured, and at the moment when the product journey starts with the owner, where this transfer of ownership begins and the person leaves the store with the watch or with the product and with the digital passport. From there, everything is going to be transparent, everything is going to be tradable, everything is going to be followed: repairs, insurances, warranties, transfer of ownership, obviously, in a very transparent way, which is going to mean what? More trust between the client and the brand, but tomorrow maybe between the first owner and the second owner. The transformation, the increase of the concept of value store. I'm not spending money, I'm investing into the relationship between the brand and the customer. I will take again the example of the bottle of wine. You see this QR code. How does the brand can know you? Maybe you're going to leave your email on a web page, which is another way to send your information in a database that no one can protect. The beauty of the blockchain is that when you get a digital passport in your hand, you store it in a digital safe that can remain anonymous if the brand allows you to do that, which is what most of the brands we work with choose to do. And that's an amazing way to create a digital link without having to put personal information at risk.
There's a lot. I mean, there's a lot to unpack there. Thank you so much for taking us through that. There's a huge amount to unpack there. There's one thing that you said that resonated with what Vincent Perriard is doing, which is this idea of the secondary market. Particularly when Angela Au-Yeung, you spoke about this idea. You're going, particularly in your vintage collection of watches, to use blockchain. We spoke about the secondary market earlier. It's very important within the secondary market, isn't it, Liz?
Right. For the first time in history, the CPO market, certified pre-owned business, has been bigger than the total sales of the Swiss watch industry in 2020. So it's one thing when you go into a store and you buy a brand, you know that you're buying the brand because you know the reseller. So you have the logo on the front of the window, so you know that there is no problem and no issue of trust. It becomes an issue of trust when you resell your watch, because as the new buyer, you live in Japan, I am in Geneva, and I'm selling you the piece. Who tells you, I am the one who tells you that I have the real watch in my hands. And it's interesting because I think the blockchain will help, or is already helping a lot of brands to build traceability. But there is one different thing between the traceability and the authentication. And it's exactly what we just heard now. We're talking about digital passport, but a digital passport, if I have a passport, you can take the passport. It doesn't mean that it's a real passport. There is a difference between the digital passport and the digital twin. We are working at Origyn with a technology that enables you to create a digital twin, like a biometry of the body of the watch, the body of the leather goods, the handbag, and so on.
How do you do that? What are we talking about in detail when you're creating a?
We create a high resolution imagery, and we take like more than 10,000 points of differentiations on the dial, on the back of the watch, on the side of the watch, and therefore we create a digital twin information. And that information then will go, absolutely yes, on a blockchain technology because you need to make sure that it's not hackable, and you want to use the technology because that's the future for sure.
How often are you having to do that? Because of course the life of a watch, for example, is long. Watches change. They acquire bumps and bruises like humans. What do you do?
But that's pretty easy because when you take take the watch, for instance. If we take 10,000 points of difference, when it's live at the factory level, when it's on the supply chain and the watchmaker is assembling the watch, we take those 10,000 points, okay? If we scratch it over time, or the sun changed the color of the dial whatsoever, we still have like 80, 85, 90, 92% of the points of reference. And the AI will tell you that this watch is authentic or not because of the number of points when you see the watch 3 years, 10 years, 15 years later. So that's easy and it works.
Serge Maillard from Europa, you've done a lot of work in this field, and you obviously can see from both the client side and from the brand perspective. I wonder if you think that a customer buying a watch that had a digital passport that was in the blockchain, do you think that customer, can we rely on that customer to then make sure that this digital passport is up to date? And at that point, is blockchain better for the client or for the brand?
Thank you, Belle, and an honor to be here with you. Actually, yeah, that's a very good question because there are challenges on both sides. It means, does the customer want to share some kind of data? And data is the new oil that the brands are looking for, exactly. So I think we talk a lot about authentication, but besides that, a really interesting point for the brands is really to have direct dialogue with the customer, and that is really a game changer because up until these last years you really had this intermediary system with the retailers and so on, and now there's been an acceleration in direct to consumer. So for this system to work, you really need everyone on board and everyone to cooperate. And I see this as the biggest challenge.
That's really, really interesting because, yeah, to see it from those both of those perspectives, particularly when we're talking about privacy, about data, it's an enormous topic, particularly for clients. Angela Au-Yeung at Vacheron Constantin, I wonder how you have found that experience with clients. Are they happy to enter into this sort of a database? Do they understand what they're doing, or are they still nervous and would prefer to give their email in the old-fashioned way?
Right. So on a very generalized way to put it, I think our clients are generally quite happy to share their contact details with us. And that's important for us because I think once you own your first piece of Vacheron Constantin timepiece, then you really enter into our universe, and we got a lot to offer, right? So that's the general way of perception. And then I think blockchain technology in reality actually offers a more secure way for us to interact with our clients. Some of the colleagues here have already mentioned it could be anonymous if the client chooses to. And that's also weaved into our design for the future development of how we use blockchain technology to really deploy it along the client journey. So in future, for example, if one owner passes the watch into the second owner, and the second owner prefers not to disclose his or her personal information with the maison, it's actually possible. But at the same time, as a maison, we could still interact with the clients while allowing the clients to remain anonymous, if that's the preference. So I think that's another very important characteristic of the technology that it can offer. So it's actually an advantage versus the old ways of doing things.
It's really interesting that, and you've obviously got some fantastically modern clients that they're kind of jumping on board with that. Alexandre, Wehrlin, I wonder if you can kind of debunk, there's always so much fear when people don't understand a technology. Is it safer to put your personal details into a blockchain rather than, say, the old-fashioned internal servers that brands have?
In the sense, yes, because first of all, it's secured. So you cannot, violate that information. And second, you can choose also to have a network of blockchain that is private. It's not necessarily public. So you can manage when you set up your blockchain concept to whom this information has access to.
Okay, so at that point, it's more secure, really.
It's more secured. For me, it's the most secured technology.
That's really Pierre-Nicolas Hurstel from Arianee. Have you had this discussion with? Because obviously you're working with several brands. Have you had that pushback on privacy, on data protection, or are people pretty comfortable with the fact that blockchain is safer?
So thanks for asking this question. I'd like to come back to your previous question. We never put any personal information on the blockchain. No one can do that. The blockchain is a place where you can't erase anything. So, just if you look at the new European regulation about the right to forget data, if you put personal information on the blockchain, it's done. You can't comply with this. We do not ask clients to put their information on the blockchain. We offer them the opportunity to keep their. The interaction that is going to happen is going to be between the brand who issued the digital passport, and the brand is going to be able to send a message to the digital passport in the safe where the digital passport is stored, without the person having to give any personal data. So the data, our thing is, the data remains on your phone. The era of privacy doesn't mean the brand doesn't know you. It means you can open your door when you decide. You keep your data secured, the only place where it can be protected on your phone, and it doesn't go on any database. So privacy is a key value for us. We are what we call a post-GDPR technology, allowing meaningful interaction to happen without having to share data or to put it on the blockchain, which we would never do. I'd like to come back also on the previous element about digital twin and recognition and authenticity, etc. We focus on creating the best digital passport technology because there are many different ways to authenticate physically a product, from capturing details about it to adding technology like NFCs or Bluetooth Low Energy that some I would say product categories could decide. And there are many people working on these fingerprints that would, characterize the object.
I'm so sorry. I have a feeling we may have lost our external guest, which is a really bad timing because we were in the middle of an extremely interesting answer there from Pierre-Nicolas Hurstel. I wanted to hear the end. I know.
I was ready to jump here.
Thankfully, both our guests in the studio here. Thank goodness we have physical people in the studio. Both of our guests wanted to intercept on that. I'm going to start with Alexandre Wehrlin because I saw him sort of wanting to speak first on this idea of GDPR, on this idea of privacy. Let's pick up on what Pierre-Nicolas
said. A little clarification just for the audience. It's a bit like your credit card. When you make a transaction online on an e-commerce, you actually don't store the credit card information on the website. You have a token, and your personal information is actually still stored within the bank. It's the same system we're talking about.
So, because this was my question, my immediate question was how on earth would the brand, if they weren't keeping any of the customer details and linking it to a device, how would they be able to get in touch?
Barclays Bank, I prepared some few examples here. For Barclays Bank, for instance, they use blockchain for their streamlining fund transfers. And they link it to what they call KYC, meaning know your customer. Now, the customer database is, of course, not within the blockchain, but with a token, they can make a link with their private secured customer database.
Yeah, okay, so I see. So it is exactly as you described, like this credit card, it's not yet taken out of your account, therefore your details aren't yet stored.
Yeah, what I meant is the credit card information is not stored on the website, but via a token, it sends a query to your bank and retrieves your information, your credit card information. In
the same way as what? So Vacheron or Constantin, or a watch brand, would have to almost request the information of the client.
With the token, exactly. Right. Okay. So like Arianee said, indeed, you don't put the customer data inside the blockchain. You keep it within your database, but you have a token to make the link.
Okay, well, that's really clear. Thank you so much. Vincent, Perriard, I know you wanted to come back on this as well.
No, yeah, my reaction, I was just about to answer the person from Arianee. It's true that there are different ways to authenticate a product, but it's not true for the watch industry and for the leather industry. I'll just give you two examples where it's not true. And I'm saying this because I'm coming from the watch industry myself, and I've been trying to find solutions for the biggest brands because I've been working for those brands in the past 20 years. the solution has been always, or at least for the last 15 years, to find a solution based on the imagery and not based on NFC, not based on anything that you add to the product. It's not possible. You don't want to be disruptive to the product. You want to be as lean as you can when it comes to the supply chain, and you don't want to be a hassle for the production people. So the only thing is image. And the imagery and the capacity of taking pictures in high resolution and to put that information into a blockchain to decentralize the information, and then for the end consumer, not for a B2B solution, for the end consumer, to have a device which is a universal device, which is an iPhone which is a smartphone. You can use that smartphone any place in the world, like Shazam. You scan your watch, and boom, you get the information if the watch is authentic or not. And this is not based on NFC, this is not based on anything that you add, and this is non-disruptive for the watch industry. And I can tell you that it doesn't exist yet. Origyn is the only company, it's not a company, it's a foundation. It's the only entity that providing, or starting to provide, because it's a long journey, starting to provide that service for the luxury industry. And it's not because we're better, just because the time was right. You know, like it's layers of technology, telephone capacity, imagery capacities, AI, machine learning, all those things are just aligned now. And it was not the case like 5 years ago.
I mean, this is fascinating because, of course, the idea that we used to have is how do you link the physical product with the blockchain? And we were talking about chips, we were talking about serial numbers, but what you're saying is actually, are you telling me that you could take your phone and you turn on the camera of the phone, and in the same way that I do a QR code in a restaurant?
I'm going to tell you, this is what one of the biggest CEO of this industry told me. Vincent, he said, this is game over. This is game over. Because imagine, I'm just giving the example of a little girl, 15 years old, she goes to school, okay? She has her telephone with her. She scanned the bag, say for a second it's a Louis Vuitton bag. And of course, when you're 15 years old, you live in a small city like Neuchâtel, like Lausanne, like whatever, you name it, okay? You all have that doubt that this girl, she has a real or a fake Louis Vuitton bag. You have a doubt because it's a small city, you know, people doesn't necessarily have the money for that. You scan it and you see in 5 seconds if the bag is authentic or not. I can tell you one thing. If the little girl, 15 years old, has the fake bag, she will do it once, not twice. Because, you know, in French we say débusquer. She will be caught, you know, she's got a fake bag and she will never do it again. So imagine that the solution will come from a universal solution that you put on a blockchain using a universal tool, which is a telephone, a smartphone, and any place in the world you can scan the product and it will tell you as a consumer, forget about the brand, as a consumer, if this product is authentic or not.
That's incredible. That's absolutely incredible. So I could be, as you say, behind someone and I'm taking from the angle that I see a photograph, and I have the app, whatever, I guess it's an app on the phone, and that's what then tells me.
In fact, you're fighting not the counterfeiter, you are trying to educate, well, educate is maybe a big word, educate the consumer to behave and not to wear any more like fake products. Gosh, that's the other way around.
That is absolutely incredible. For me, would you like to say something, Alexandre?
Yeah, I'm selling my Range Rover. And this is the book I have
I was about to say, we're all buying,
my car. And I had a customer. I would like to see it from the consumer point of view. So he asked me, did you do a service of your car? And I said, of course. Here's the proof of me doing this service. I won't say the garage name, but there's all the different stamps. And then within what they did in July 2019 at these kilometers, actually it's B service. I'm not really sure what I did as a service to the car. Now imagine you're putting this into the blockchain and you're digitalizing and you're in the parking like it happened to me. And then I transfer that information. They know exactly what car, when it was bought, and all the service that you did. It values the car. So the brand has a relationship now with the car, with the product, if they do the blockchain from the beginning, and with the consumer as well. And they can do the product life cycle, manage the product, and it values the product itself, to my point of view, just by digitalizing this.
So it removes so much of the human error and the human manipulation that we can find within the transfer of these sorts of luxury goods. I want to, for those, you probably have seen that we have got our guests from around the world back now. Thank you so much. I'm very happy to have you all back with us. I'm so sorry we lost you. Particularly Pierre-Nicolas Hurstel, after you dropped off, we had an enormous amount of debate about what you were saying. There was a lot of discussion about everything that you'd told us. I just want to, because we spoke about this idea of essentially game over. That was your Vincent Perriard said Origyn would be game over for counterfeiters, because essentially you could take a visual photograph on a telephone, anyone could do it, and you'd be able to see whether a product was real or fake. Serge, Maillard, from your perspective, I just wonder with this overview of brands, whether brands are really focused on counterfeit goods, on fakes, because there is a sense within particularly the watch world, and we are talking about watches, of course, this week, that brands track their watches already quite well, and that the purchase of fakes often doesn't necessarily displace the purchase of the real deal. So do you think brands are going to be motivated to really try and crack down on fakes within the watch industry? Serge Maillard. We have no. Oh my goodness! We thought we were there, but the technology has defeated us, which is ironic.
But I can,
yes.
If Serge is here and hear me, then just jump in. But I can give you the answer for Serge, because I think the answer is honestly, I still think that the watch brands are not so embarrassed by the counterfeits. They are more and more embarrassed by the super fake counterfeits. Because the problem is not the fact that they're eating their market shares and business. It's not really about that, because for 50 years they know that subject, and it's like on the P&L it's one line. But the problem is when you buy a super high quality brand, say you buy a Patek, and you buy it for 2,000 euros in Paris, and it's what we call a super fake. And the watch is exactly the same as the other one, the real one. And you even give it back to a Patek, and they have a problem to authenticate it. And that becomes an issue, not because someone has paid 2,000 and spent the money there. It becomes an issue because some people start to understand that for 2,000 euros, you can have the same quality of a watch, which is 25, 30, or 35,000 euros on the other side for the real one. And that shows a bit more transparently the difference between the cost of goods plus the marketing, plus the distribution margin and so on, and why suddenly the product, the authentic product, is like 30 or 35. And that becomes an issue because transparency is becoming everywhere, and those super fake becomes an issue for brands to manage.
That is fascinating, but as you say, it's not the everyday fakes that you find in the high street.
But it's becoming more and more available on the market.
Yeah, and we see that within the art world. There's suddenly authenticity is so important, and if you can't tell the difference between them, if even the specialists and the makers can't tell the difference, then that does become a problem. Alexandre Wehrlin, is there an issue sometimes for brands when they're approaching this that they perceive blockchain to be expensive to invest in, and that puts them off?
Indeed, I think they see that like a big effort, cost to buy the service, to develop the technology, cost of human also, because you need a team to set this up, and has also an indirect cost. However, I think the benefits in terms of counterfeit, in terms of also sustainability. I think sustainability, we talked about authenticity, counterfeiting, direct-to-consumer relationship, etc. But I think sustainability with new generation is becoming a big issue. You know, at our school, I see new generation every day. And on the thesis, 45% on our luxury business marketing have chosen a sustainability topic. And topics that I didn't even came to my mind, such as the truth in communication, such as recycling, such as sourcing of products. And I think this will become a very big topic and growing topic, essential one, where they would expect transparency, which blockchain now allows, and they would expect brand to be clear on their sustainable supply chain. And this technology allows it. Like Ford, for example, they implemented the sustainability for their cobalt sourcing to produce their cars from their suppliers to ensure the quality and the extract of cobalt is done the right way.
That's really interesting because it's not the first time we've heard transparency within the context of this discussion. Pierre-Nicolas Hurstel from Arianee, at the risk of us falling off the platform again, I'm going to come back to you just to ask on that issue of transparency, because you did mention it when we were talking to you before. Can you give us a few more sort of practical applications of this idea? Alexandre Wehrlin was beginning with this, of how transparency can be helped within brands by blockchain.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I think a digital passport is a commitment for a brand. You're going to create a digital asset where you're going to tell the story of your product. You're going to transfer this digital asset to your client. So you better be right on what you're going to put inside. But on the other hand, most of what you're going to put inside is still going to be declarative. So the question is, how far do you go? How much data do you share about the way the product was made? Because, you know, we're talking about luxury, about amazing experiences, about dream, about, you know, exceptional know-hows, about scarcity. Are you really going to open the book to your entire supply chain and let people know the address of the warehouse and how long the watch spent in the warehouse and where this and where that, and how much of that is part of the luxury experience? So our take on this is, okay, let's allow the brand to share within the digital passport the most important element that the client must know. And then let's have third parties come and validate what the commitments of the brands. Fairmind, you know, made here, made there, respect of ethical standards, a carbon footprint. All of this can be validated by third parties. And on a blockchain protocol, it's very interesting to have people signing and verifying things. So for example, tomorrow you'll issue your digital passport for your watch and you will say, okay, did it the right way on gold. And you will have a third party, you know, certification that will say, yes, they did it. We checked and we stamped this. That's our take on how transparency can be embedded through blockchain with the good level, you know, of information between opening everything to sharing what is important. At the contrary, the example that was shared earlier about the car and, you know, all the repairs, on this you need full transparency. You know, once you've got your object in your hand, you need to be able to say, okay, that's what happened. That's when it was repaired, when it changed hand, when the warranty stopped. And for this, the time stamping properties of the blockchain registry is really interesting.
Very, very interesting.
So there's transparency upstream and downstream.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that. Serge Maillard, I'm going to come back to you just for this idea. We think of particularly Swiss watchmaking, we think of heritage, we think of tradition. When we're talking not about the sort of blockchain and machine learning use that Vincent Perriard has been talking about, but when we talk about perhaps this idea of chips and serial numbers and linking items, it feels very counter to the Swiss watchmaking industry, this idea of trying to put a chip, perhaps, inside of a watch. Do you see any sort of compatibility between these two worlds? Are they natural bedfellows?
Well, it's actually a game changer, the blockchain. And what I would say is that the technology still is maturing in some way, so we will eventually find maybe the right way to associate the watch with the right data. So I see even on the set right now, there are several methods, there are several protocols. And what's interesting on the side of the brands is that they are already imagining what use they can make of this new technology, because we are in the era of transparency, and transparency, as you say, is also new for the watch brands. And it's been opening up in the last years already very much, thanks to the social media, thanks to the digital tools. This is not an industry that has been so much used of transparency for so long. So this is really a change. When you talk about blockchain, this is also a new mindset, and this is really key to understand. This is a new mindset for everyone to integrate, and the governance side is also very important, as was mentioned, to really manage which data, how you want to have some kind of, I don't know, the Swiss made of blockchain or some kind of governance coming together, and we see that there is a solution for several brands, then there is another solution maybe for another brand. And I think that's really fascinating, because we've seen with the last year with the pandemic, we've seen an acceleration in this innovation, and this is still happening. I mean, we still see this R&D happening all the time and ongoing, and that's really the meeting of high tech and the watch industry. And when we thought about high tech and the watch industry, we thought about connected watches and so on. But I think what's really interesting is to change the business environment of watches, and that's where blockchain can intervene.
That's really interesting. I'd love to hear, thank you for that. I'd love to hear off the back of that from a brand. And of course, we have Angela Au-Yeung here from Vacheron Constantin. How do you approach what Serge Maillard just said in terms of, you know, what is the future for you, for your brand, in terms of using blockchain? Could you ever see a chip in the watches, or how are you going to play it?
Right. So I think today we touched on a number of use cases that are, you know, being explored or even tested by different brands in the industry or even in other industry. What we haven't really touched on is also that blockchain, it's a really fundamentally revolutionizing the internet. And I mean, by extension, it's going to revolutionize our world. Basically how we, you know, use social media as an end user, and if we follow larger dynamics or larger forces that are at play. Serge mentioned about government regulations. Do they want to be super controlling, or do they want to, you know, really give a bit of a playground for industries like ours to manifest and test on the use cases? I think the approach would change a lot of things. There is the decentralized nature of the technology that we haven't really got a chance to talk a lot about, but it's going to change a lot of ways how people are going to perceive data privacy or how they interact with brands like ours, right? There is a digital identity of individuals. Do we have like a product identity, my authentic self and my digital self, are they totally synchronized? Would I be able to interact with brands or other people, peers, in a more secure manner? So all these, I think, as a responsible business owner or as a maison, we need to really pay attention. Then there is, I think, from a design perspective as well. In the past, when the internet did not happen, and then finally it happened, it came to us. Today, it's our everyday life that we breathe it and live it. Tomorrow, blockchain will be the same. It will take some time to get there, just like the internet also took time to develop and to evolve to its very mature state today. But blockchain is going to happen a lot faster, in my opinion. And in the old days, when we talk about, you know, mobile first design to at a brief period of time, people talk about thumb first design for digital interactions. I think for us today, we also need to think about what is blockchain first design. How is it going to impact the larger ecosystems, all the players that are part of this ecosystem, and it's not just one particular industry, but generally.
I wish we had time to go through every single point that you just made, because there were hundreds of them and they were all extremely good. I'd love Pierre-Nicolas Hurstel from Arianee just to pick up on the back of that, hearing from a brand like that. How would you talk about that, this idea of the decentralized nature of blockchain, how it can affect the industry?
I'd say two things. Blockchain is the revolution of value on the internet. There was no value on the internet. You would have a photo, you would send it, it's duplicated, you never know which one is true. With the blockchain, you create this notion of digital value that can be traceable, that can be exchanged, that can be transferred, that can be stored privately. That's what's awesome. I mean, blockchain is not going to solve counterfeiting or authentication. You need something physical to happen to do that. You need a picture to be taken when the watch leaves the manufacturer, or you need an NFC chip on a bag. All of this is physical. This is not blockchain. Blockchain gives the sense of value online. Your capacity to prove digitally that you are the true owner of a product, that you are the person you say you are, that you can access something, a community, a service, an experience, because you can prove this value on that online. That's where the revolution lies. And Angela is right. Blockchain is going to be everywhere. It's going to transform that. I'd just like to bounce back on the governance thing, because I totally agree. We need governance to make sure that all of this works well. At Arianee, we started by creating an open source protocol and putting it in an association non-profit 1901 law in France, where we welcomed Richemont, Audemars Piguet, Breitling, Manufacture Royale, many brands. They participate in this governance. They create this common good together that is going to be the standard of a digital passport. They collaborate together. You put them all in a room, and all these head of innovations and head of marketing, they talk about where this has to go, and we guarantee them that this piece of technology will never be sold, will never be taken by any of them, and that they will always have their hands on that. So totally agreed on the governance thing, and let's be ready for the revolution of digital value.
That's really interesting. I was about to ask if it was a revolution, but I'm really interested to hear there that for you, rather than cryptocurrencies, rather necessarily than this idea of kind of the traditional, conventional way of thinking about blockchain, about Bitcoin, etc., for you it's authentication, it's transparency, it's governance. I wonder if across the board we have agreement on that. Is that the better application of blockchain, do you think?
Absolutely, and I think new generation of clients, they don't expect brands to be perfect, or we don't need to be transparent on anything, but they expect, and they will expect more, that on the key topics, brands are doing their best effort to have a sustainable supply chain, just to take pick up one of the points you mentioned.
Absolutely.
For example, I think brands also did great progress over the last years in plural. I mean, recently I've read a post about Cartier who said they will have green gold in the future on all their products. How does you as an end consumer can know this? I remember also in other brands, in the efforts in terms of packaging, in terms of CO2 footprint, there is a lot of progress. I think when you buy luxury products, you don't expect to buy a Patagonia kind of brand that is a positive impact in the world, but they expect on key aspects that brands are doing their best efforts. And I think blockchain, through what has been said on authenticity, on trust, on tracking, can really address this to new generation.
Fantastic, thank you so much. I wish we had time for more on this discussion, but we are moving over to your questions. We've taken up our good 45 minutes over here, so we've got 15 minutes now of questions from the audience. We're crossing over to Pascal Ravestou, who's going to talk us through those questions. Do you have a first question for us, Pascal?
Yes, first we have a lot of reactions. Maybe the first comment we had is that luxury sells dreams and emotions, and blockchain appears like a digital constraint and a big brother eye over your shoulder. It's a tough union. So maybe it doesn't bring a question, but maybe some food for thought. The second aspect, we received a lot of comments on the more pressing issue that is sustainability, but not sustainability of the brand, sustainability of the blockchain. Which leads me to the first question we have from Anders, and it's a bit of a data, and it's quite impressive. A single Bitcoin transaction has the same carbon footprint that 680,000 Visa transactions. Bitcoin is said to consume the same energy as the whole of Switzerland for 1 year. So isn't it urgent to integrate this sustainability aspect, of this new technology, because it's actually quite interesting.
Yeah, we can talk about sustainability, but actually if we're trying to create more sustainability within the brands, maybe it's undercutting that. Alexandre Wehrlin, do you want to start on that?
I think there's a new way. I think at PFL there's a research going on. I'm limited technically I'm not an engineer, but there's a new method of calculating farms that will consume less energy, which is the issue. This is why you have all these farms, in Iceland and all these countries, because for heater and cooling off and all these aspects. So there's a new calculation apparently that will reduce the CO2. But yes, indeed, it's polluting. But it brings, by bringing transparency and bringing all these aspects, it brings a direct benefit in many other implications of sustainability. Number two, on the marketing, I think is what do you do with that information? And that's a whole new area of marketing that you can imagine in terms of services or what you can do in your relationship with your customer. Very briefly, because we haven't got a huge amount of time, Pierre-Nicolas, Hurstel, I wonder if you've got a thought on that idea of transparency, because you work in this field a lot every day.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll come back to this big brother thing and blockchain against emotion, etc. Luxury has always been a leader into integrating tradition and modernity. these brands that have been here forever, that are still here today, they're here because they've melted, they've blended the origins of their know-hows with the actuality and the time relevance of what they do. And right now, luxury is embracing this extremely innovative technology that is blockchain, putting in the hands of their clients. You know, we're talking a lot about NFTs these days, you know, these non-fungible tokens and these artworks that are sold super expensively. And you have a brand like Vacheron who's been using this technology for 2 years now. Luxury is ahead of its time. Now, how is exactly going to happen, the transfer, all the experience, the ceremonies, it's still in the works. But I think luxury is playing a wonderful game here, melting tradition and modernity. Now, coming back to the energy situation, I mean, obviously, using Bitcoin today would be terrible. You know, Bitcoin is what it is. We use blockchain for its benefits, but we have to find ways not to depend on the very bad energy performance. And the bad energy performance also comes with bad economic performance and with unreliability because of the saturation of the chains. So I think the way where it's going towards side chains, smaller chains, more controlled consensus protocols that will allow for a much higher performance, more predictability, and better energy consumption. For example, the technology we use is 1,000 times less consuming than Ethereum, 1,000 times more performant, more reliable, and economically efficient.
Fantastic. Listen, I want to just quickly bring in Serge Maillard on that. I wonder if you think brands understand this idea of sustainability within blockchain. Do they understand the energy that was required?
Yeah, I think the challenge with sustainable development is that when you move a parameter in one direction, it can move another one in another direction. And we've seen this this week. We've talked a lot about sustainability as well during Watches and Wonders. So it's true that whenever you have a new technologies, you have a lot of fantasies around it, and it's normal, and you have to understand the technology. But then it will also create new challenges that you are not necessarily aware now, and that was the same thing. We thought the internet would change the world, would make a better world. It's half, let's say, today. So it's true that the virtual doesn't mean that there's not physical somewhere, and the servers are actually very energy savvy. So it will be a challenge. So I think everyone is aware of that. But so it's all these questions that we have to answer now. So it can be Big Brother, it can be sustainability. We have to be. This is transparency.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
Really interesting point. Pascal, do you have another question for us?
I have many questions.
I know,
Maybe we
I'm
have time for two more.
We'll whiz through.
Okay, so the first one is for Vincent. There is a kind of a concern. Don't you see a massive problem with privacy if everyone can just scan their phone what I'm wearing?
That's the responsibility of the person that wears the fake products. You were talking about transparency. This is transparency. I think that the game over comes from when you empower the consumer, you don't empower the brand. So Origyn is all about empowering the vision. I'm talking about the vision, empowering the consumer, and it's a long journey. Don't get me wrong. It's going to take time, but and I really have the sensation about our discussion right now, and we'll see after in 2 or 3 years, that we are just at the beginning of something. Honestly, we are we see the problem of energy, and I really have this impression that what I know is that new blockchain technologies, new chains are coming up next year, this summer, next year, are far better and more powerful than Ethereum and that what we have seen, because Ethereum is already like an old chap, really, honestly. What's coming up right now is chains, blockchains, being able to be eating less energy, and secondly, like moving a lot of data. Now, just coming back to Pascal's point, just like two questions ago, I think that the marketing transparency thing or the data transparency, it's just a question of generation. Probably the person asked the question is like maybe my age and more, but honestly, this is not a question anymore for the new generation, and especially in Asia, the Chinese generation, empowered now with the money. This is not a question anymore. Now let's change, that's for sure. Forget it.
That's fascinating stuff. Let's try and get that other question in as well, Pascal.
Yes, it's a question from Magnus, who is probably our most assiduous questioner throughout the week. So thank you, Magnus. The information contained in the blockchain is only as good as it is input. What if there are holes in the history of the product, e.g. a second-hand transaction that would not be recorded by the brand, etc., etc.?
Vincent Perriard, I see you wanting to pick up immediately on that, but we'll start with you.
No, but forget it. I just removed my Origyn hat. I'm like a brand hat. And of course, I was in a sales meeting with one of the big brands. And in front of me, and just by coincidence, they were dealing with a pile of authentic cards with QR codes on them, okay? They were disconnected from the product themselves. It means there is a business of digital passports going around. As long as you don't kill that, as long as you don't connect the real physical product to the blockchain, you always have like a talon d'Achille in French, like the weak point, the weak link. Of course, that's just logic. There is no math behind that. It's just like as long as you don't connect those two dots, there is a missing link, there is a gap, there is a problem, there is an issue. And that's why I'm telling you, this is just the beginning of the journey.
Pierre-Nicolas, Hurstel, I saw you wanting to talk on that, and Serge Maillard, we will come to you as well. Let's start with Pierre-Nicolas, Hurstel, and then we'll go to Serge Maillard.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, you look at the record of repairs on the Range Rover or Land Rover car that was presented earlier. There can be holes everywhere. But the incredible properties of this technology is that a transfer of ownership doesn't need the intervention of anyone to be recorded. It's just recorded when it happens. The smart contract allows for the execution of this record to be made without the brand taking part in this. The possibility for any third party, any repair center within the brand or outside to come and type stamp remotely a digital asset wherever it is and whichever safe it's been stored is really going to make this much easier. Now you can't always, make up for every situation, but the properties of this technology are much better than any other to make sure that the number of holes will be limited and that we will have the highest level of transparency on the product life cycle.
Serge Maillard, I saw you wanted to talk as well.
Yes, actually, this question about holes is very interesting because in our own history, we've digitized almost 100 years of archives, and we've noticed we have these holes. We have 10 years maybe missing here or there, and this is how digital can help the physical world. This is by keeping a digital track of what is recorded today in the physical world, and we know that whenever there is economic hardship, companies can disappear, or this is a way to ensure that even if the company disappears, in a way you have the lifespan, which is in many ways longer than our own lives as human beings, of a watch, will be kept. And this is so essential today to use virtual tools to safeguard the physical heritage of watchmaking in particular, as we are so much interested in our history of watches.
Absolutely. Pascal, do we have time for one more, maybe?
Yeah, hopefully, yes.
I think we do. I've been told we do. I think we're all right.
Given the anonymity of blockchain, you could, in theory, create NFT, so non-fungible token, connected to a digital or physical world without being the rightful owner of the work. Can you enlighten us on this point? Is it possible? Is it?
So to have, just described, I guess, so to have a non-fungible token?
Yes. So you can basically certify a work that is not belonging to you. Is this true? Is it possible? Because then it's the weakest link in the, in the chain.
Yeah.
What that Vincent was referring to.
Is there, I mean, to be honest, I don't know if can anyone answer that question?
I think, maybe,
Arianee,
and I will try also.
Okay.
I will try.
Alexandre Wehrlin is going to try first. Pierre-Nicolas,
I try first, but please be nice with me
if I'm
saying.
A short response from both of you.
Usually, I think, like in the old times, if we can say old times already, is a data model. You do a data model and an ownership of the sourcing of the data. So if we go back to the wine bottle, you define who is the owner of when the grape is collected in the field and by whom. You have an owner of the data of the winemaker, who is he, etc. You have an owner of the data within the winemaking process about the vinification and all this. And you have an owner of the data of the supply chain, of the transportation, until the table of the consumer. And that precisely, that transparency and that ownership reduce, not completely, I agree with you, but reduce the possibility of counterfeiting information because you have an ownership and that's visible.
Pierre-Nicolas Hurstel, would you agree with that? Is that how you'd approach it?
Yes, I would go even a little further. It's really important to be able, for an NFT, for a digital passport, to verify the source. So NFTs in general, anyone could generate NFTs, on any blockchain. That's why you need applications on top of it. You need to enrich the concept of NFTs, which is what we've been doing for years, is to create a protocol, which is a set of features and smart contracts that are taking the best of this technology to make it adaptable to brands. And the main element, obviously, is to verify the source. On the Arianee protocol, if you look at an NFT, you immediately look at who's the source and you see if this source is verified. If this brand has verified identity on the network that they maintain, that has been checked by the consortium, and that anyone can transparently verify in full transparency to make sure that, yes, this is Vacheron that generated this passport, and you can trace it. So there's no way on an open source protocol like ours to have NFTs generated by someone who's not verified.
I'm gonna be extremely naughty because I just want to hear one sentence from Angela Au-Yeung here, because we've been so involved in this world here, listening to the deep technology there. Are these the sort of conversations, just very briefly, that you're having on a daily basis at Vacheron, Constantin?
Yeah, I wouldn't say on a daily basis, but I think we already have a lot of discussions and a few use cases that we definitely wanted to put it on our roadmap, and it's in the making. Then again, going back to what I was sharing earlier, I think there are even larger dynamics, larger forces at play that are very critical to the development of our business, but also how our clients ultimately are going to interact and expect from us as a maison. So we really talk about that a lot. We pay a lot of attention on all these possibilities.
It's brilliant. I mean, thank you so much. It's brilliant to hear that these very technical discussions are happening at the heart of the watchmaking industry. Thank you so much to all my guests. I think we can conclude really that blockchain certainly is the revolutionary force that everyone thought it might be. It's going to certainly revolutionize authentication, transparency, governance. But as I think Serge Maillard, in fact, said right at the beginning of the discussion, it does need to be bought into by everybody within the industry. So thank you so much to all of my guests who were here with us today. Tomorrow we'll be back for the final panel. We'll be looking back at the trends throughout the week. So join us, same time, same place. Thanks. Bye.